Okay, I think I know what you're talking about. So in your email, you're saying you want to take the images that you have and put them onto a chalkboard type texture in Photoshop, and you also want to change up the color of the images that you've drawn. There's a couple of ways you can do it, but the technique I'm going to show you will probably give you the best results. Hopefully it's what you're talking about. First of all, I've opened up your image in Photoshop, and let's make it a little bit more contrasting so we can see what we're working with. To do this, we're going to go to Image and Adjustments, choose your levels. With this, it'll bring up a little histogram, and I just want you to click on the darkest most arrow on the far right left-hand side and drag it inward to the right. And when you do that, you can start to see your image will become much, much darker up at the top. Kind of drag it not all the way to the edge, but pretty close to the end, so that everything becomes much darker and the lights become lighter. We'll say OK to that. Zoom back out. Now I can start to see the fish and the crab and the food and everything that you've drawn on here. Now I've gone ahead and downloaded a chalkboard type texture. Let me close this out of the way. And so I'm going to grab our move tool, the black arrow, and I'm just going to click and drag this onto the chalkboard. Now kind of comes the fun, hard technique to convert this. What we need to do is we need to invert the layer that we're working on. So I'm working on layer 1, which is your drawing. Go up to Image and Adjustments and choose Invert. So this is going to turn everything black to white, white to black. The next thing we need to do is to get rid of the black and let it blend in. To do this, we're going to change layer 1's color mode from normal to screen. And this will get it pretty good most of the ways, but notice you can still see the outer edge. So with layer 1 still selected, let's bring back up our levels, Image, Adjustments, choose your levels. And we're going to drag that right or leftmost arrow to the right until the edges disappear. That's what we're looking for. Pretty good. We'll say OK now. All right. So now it looks like a good chalk drawing on a chalk surface. Here's how you can change up the actual colors of the chalk drawing. Going back into our layers palette, we're going to make a new layer on top of layer 1. So clicking the new layer. We're going to convert this to a special type of layer called a clipping mask layer. To do this, hold down your Option key and scroll your mouse in between layer 2 and 1. You can see it changes to this type of icon. When I click once, remember I was holding down my Option key, it gives me this little icon, and what this is going to do is anything you paint on layer 2 is only going to affect layer 1. That sounds kind of funny, but let me show you what it's going to do. Another thing we're going to do with layer 2, change it from normal to multiply mode, because that's how we want the pixels to interact. Zoom back out. Now I'm going to grab my paintbrush tool. Let's get a big paintbrush that we can work with. I'll use this one, make it a little bit bigger. Yeah. Let's grab a color. So let's say I wanted to make this fish green. I'll zoom in on them. Now keep in mind we're still working in layer 2, that topmost clipping mask. So when I click and drag over it, it'll change everything that's white to green. And there could be some other way of doing it, but this is how I would do it because it gives you the best results, and you can always go back and change this to any color that you wanted from there. Now to take it a step further, let's say you actually wanted to fill in this with a different type of color and still give it that kind of chalky type feel. Here's how I would do that. Let's go back to our layers palette. We're going to click on the background layer, and let's make a new layer on top of it. And we're going to change this layer mode to, I think screen will give you the best results. Okay, so layer 3 is underneath all of those, but above the background layer, set to screen. Working in this layer, let's change our brush that we're using. Up here, I'm going to choose one of these kind of textured, chalky looking brushes. I think this one will work out pretty good. I'll make it a little bigger too. Yeah. If you didn't know the keyboard shortcut, the open and close brackets on your keyboard next to the P will allow you to change up the size of your brush. Now with this brush, when you click and drag, it won't be your typical rounded brush. It kind of gives you a good little texture. Let's make it look even more like a chalky type texture by opening up your brushes palette. You can do this by finding it at the top left-hand side of your brushes palette, clicking on this little icon, and it looks like this. This is going to allow you to customize the brush. Very cool stuff. First thing we're going to do, let's bring up the spacing. Notice I'm under the brush tips shape. Bring the spacing up. You can see it'll start to push it outward. So now when I use this paintbrush, you can see it's not going to be all together. It's actually going to space out my spacing a little bit more. Already that's looking a lot more like a true chalk texture. Another thing we can do, click on Shape Dynamics. We can tell it to change up the size of the brush by giving it a little bit of what's called a jitter. It can go bigger and smaller. So now when I use this brush, it'll get bigger and smaller as I use it throughout there. The final thing I would do, let's add some scattering. With this one, you got your preview down here at the bottom. You can kind of give it an idea of not necessarily staying in a complete line. It'll actually change itself up a little bit. I'll even bring up the count to say 3, and we'll scatter it about 124 on both axes. You can play around with these and do a lot with it. But now, I'll zoom back out, bring this down a bit. If I wanted to fill in my area, ooh, got a lot of scattering going on. Let's bring that back in a little bit, give me a little more control. I'll zoom in on him. I'll even drop down my opacity for the brush. So I'm going to change my opacity from 100%. I always like working around 50 to 60% just to build upon it. And when I paint into it, you can see I can very easily build up that shape and paint in that particular texture all by itself. Very, very cool, very fun thing to get into. You can always play around with your brushes and customizing the brushes exactly how you want to do that. And you can only do that when you open up your brushes palette from there. So I hope this is what you were looking for. If not, let me know and see if I can do something else for you. All right, have a good one.